When this man saved a horse from certain death, everyone was surprised by his sudden gesture, but no one was more grateful than the racehorse. When she arrived at her new home, her response to her newfound freedom touched his heart deeply. Jamie Castano glanced around, taking in the buzz of conversations happening in every corner. This was one of the biggest auctions he'd ever attended, and the friend who had brought him was already mingling with the crowd, chatting excitedly with other guests. Castano wasn't particularly fond of events like this. Most of the animals he saw at auctions had been raised just to be sold off, while others had led tough lives and were now listed simply because they were no longer useful to their owners. But ever since he started the Freedom Farm Animal Rescue, Castano had come to realize that attending auctions was an essential reminder of why he poured so much effort into his work. Standing here in this warehouse, about to witness hundreds of animals being sold, or worse, was his way of staying grounded in his mission. It reminded him exactly why he had created the rescue in the first place, and just how meaningful the work truly was. Even though he knew they couldn't save every animal, the idea that even one or two might find a better life was enough to keep going. Still, today wasn't one of those days where he'd be able to help. The rescue had recently used up most of its resources, saving and rehoming animals, so he was only here to take photos and videos for their social media, hoping to raise awareness and support for their cause. His chest tightened as the auction began, and Castano watched the animals being let out one by one. He kept recording everything, determined to post it as soon as he left. There were plenty of cattle, lambs, and other animals, but what most people, including Castano, had come to see were the horses. They were set to be the final animals showcased at the event. 2 hours had gone by when the auctioneer finally announced the horses. Castano raised his camera again, ignoring the sideways glances people gave him. Sadness welled up inside him as the horses came out one after another. Some were bought right away, while others were taken back behind the scenes with no interest. Part of Castano wanted to bid on some of the horses, but he didn't have the money to do so. Watching the animals walk in and out made his heart tighten even more, and he finally decided to leave just before the auction ended. But as he stood up to go, the auctioneer announced the next horse. Castano turned one last time to glance at the mare being brought in and was instantly struck by her. As he watched her trot around the floor, something about her sparked a deep sense of familiarity. He couldn't place it exactly, but he felt like he'd seen this very mare somewhere before. He glanced around at the crowd. No one was bidding. The auctioneer called again, but still no one raised a hand. "What's wrong with her?" Castano asked the person standing nearby. "Oh, can't you see it?" the man replied, pointing down toward the horse's legs. That's when Castano saw it. On both of the horse's front legs were multiple pin firing marks. Pin firing is a treatment mostly used for horses with splints, curbs, tendon, and ligament issues, and injuries to the fetlock and surrounding tissues. But typically, a racehorse might have 4 or 5 of these marks in total. This mare had nearly 20. "No horse should have that many on its legs," Castano said quietly. "What do you think happened?" "I don't know," the man answered, "but no one's going to want a horse like that." Castano stared intently at the mare as she was slowly being led back behind the curtains. He couldn't help but wonder what would happen to her without a new owner. But just as the horse was about to exit the warehouse, something caught his eye, a number tattooed on her neck, 25. "Oh my God, is that who I think it is?" he thought. From the moment she walked in, something about her had seemed familiar, but now he knew why. As a teenager and young man, Jamie Castano had shared a special bond with his uncle. He had spent countless hours at the older man's home, where they shared all kinds of stories and memories together. However, one of their favorite things to do together was going to watch the horses at the racetrack. Castano didn't know much about racing, but his uncle did, and he loved the sport. so Jamie had little choice but to tag along. He never fully understood what his uncle found so fascinating about it, but his love and respect for the older man meant he would support him however he could. At one of these events, Castano noticed his uncle seemed especially excited. He couldn't stop talking. It was June 25th, his birthday, but there was another reason for his excitement. He was eager to see a certain horse make her return to the racetrack. The mare was named Gas Eternal, and she had been gaining popularity for her strong performances. Gas was known for consistently finishing in the top 3, and placing a bet on her was considered a near guarantee for a win. But unfortunately, during her earlier races, she had been pushed hard and sustained injuries. As a result, she'd been recovering and was now finally returning to the track after nearly a year away. After hearing her story, Castano was eager to see her run, but even his excitement couldn't match his uncle's. Before the race began, his uncle placed a bet on her to win and smiled, saying it would be the perfect birthday present. Castano and his uncle found a spot near the edge of the stands and watched as the horses were led out. At the very end of the row was Gas Eternal. She looked majestic, her sleek brown coat glistening under the sun, and from where Castano stood, there was no sign that she'd ever been injured. Her rider looked confident and ready to go. When the gun fired, Gas took off immediately, quickly gaining distance from the others. Castano noticed her legs seemed to buckle slightly when she leaped over obstacles, but she pushed through and raced on as if nothing was wrong. Gas Eternal crossed the finish line first, but was quickly led off the track and surrounded by a group of handlers. Castano couldn't bear to watch what was happening, and his uncle gently pulled him away to collect their winnings and head home for the birthday celebration. But when they returned a few weeks later for another race, they were shocked to learn that Gas Eternal had been retired. That last race had put too much strain on her legs and body, and despite all the treatments, she couldn't race again. Castano and his uncle had been among the lucky few who got to witness her final run. Castano returned home that day feeling a deep sadness. Despite his general lack of interest in horse racing, he had developed a soft spot for that horse after seeing her just once. He'd always hoped he might catch a glimpse of her again. Back then, he had only just begun his animal rescue and was starting to learn more about what often happened to animals who were no longer seen as valuable by their owners. But because this horse had once enjoyed a successful racing career, he had hoped she'd be the exception. Now, seeing her again, his heart sank at the thought of what she must have endured. Castano followed her out of the warehouse, unable to walk away. One of his friends noticed and hurried after him. Outside, Castano arrived just in time to see Gas being taken to her pen. It was a direct ship pen, meaning that because she hadn't been sold, she would be sent to a slaughterhouse right after the auction. He approached the man, who appeared to be her handler, and apologized for not bidding. Castano explained that he had wanted her, but only realized how much after she was taken away. His friend, knowing someone on the auction team, suggested they might work something out. Since no one had placed a bid, maybe they could come to an agreement and still buy the mare. The caretaker agreed. After placing Gas in the pen, he walked away, leaving Castano standing there. This was the first time he'd ever gotten to see her up close since that day at the racetrack. He looked again at her neck. Gas Eternal still had the number 25 tattooed on her skin. Castano also had the number 25 tattooed on his arm, a tribute he'd made after his uncle passed away. Seeing the horse his uncle had adored bearing the same number, Castano couldn't believe it was just chance. He truly felt he was meant to find her and to save her. He slowly reached out to touch her, but she flinched, pulling away from his hand. "What has she been through in her life?" Castano asked quietly. "She hasn't had it easy, you know," the auctioneer replied. He had just arrived, having been told by the caretaker that someone had shown interest in Gas Eternal and wanted to see who it was. After all, the mare had a bit of a reputation in the racing world. Gas Eternal was born in 1999 and had spent most of her life as a racehorse. However, during one of her races, she had suffered a severe injury that made jumping difficult. The pin-firing marks on her legs were proof of how often she'd been treated just to keep racing, 18 on each leg. When it became clear that she could no longer compete, she was sold off and used as an Amish buggy horse. The auctioneer pointed out the patches of hair loss still visible on both sides of her face, clear signs of where the buggy equipment had rubbed against her skin. He didn't know exactly why her most recent owner had decided to sell her, but here she was. The owner was willing to accept almost any price, and if Castano could gather $3,000 before the end of the day, the horse would be his. Castano sprang into action, reaching out to his followers on social media. The animal rescue only had $1,000 left in its budget, so if they were going to save this horse, they needed help, and fast. Hours passed after he posted, but no one responded. Many followers praised his dedication to animals, but none offered financial support. With only 4 hours remaining until the end of the day, Castano was starting to lose hope. His family pitched in with $1,000, and the friend who had joined him at the auction contributed as well. Still, they were short of the full amount, and it was beginning to look like he wouldn't be able to save Gas after all. Just as he was considering what to do next, Castano received a notification, and something incredible had happened. He almost couldn't believe it when he saw that one of his followers had come through. They'd seen his post and offered to cover the rest of the cost, just in time. Castano immediately called the auctioneer to let him know he now had everything needed to purchase the mare. The next day, he was invited to the farm to pick her up. As he returned to the Animal Rescue Center with Gas Eternal in tow, Castano couldn't stop smiling. He had thought it was impossible, but something had come through in the final moments. That last-minute miracle only strengthened his belief that he was meant to save her, and this time he and his team were determined to give her the best home possible. Castano alerted his team when he arrived, and they were all waiting at the stable entrance, excited to welcome their newest rescue. But they had no idea about the surprise Gas had in store for them. As she walked into her new pen, her entire posture changed. She stood taller and straighter. It was as if she knew her fate had finally shifted. Gas dropped to the ground and began rolling around joyfully. After months of uncertainty, the horse finally had a reason to relax. She seemed to understand she was now in safe hands. Castano and the team stood by, cheering as she rolled happily, her reaction to freedom proving more than anything else that Castano had made the right call. Upon arrival, Gas was placed in quarantine for 3 weeks. She was still frightened of people, but gradually began to warm up to Castano. Every time he showed up, she'd trot over and follow him around. It wasn't long before her true personality began to shine through, and her caretakers quickly fell in love with her. Her once thin body filled out, and her coat grew thick and beautiful again. She embraced her newfound freedom, often galloping through the open space, showing off the same powerful strides that once made her a champion on the track. By the end of her quarantine, Gas was the picture of health. The rescue center made the decision not to rehome her, and instead gave her a permanent spot in the stables. She had earned her peace, and Castano was determined to make sure she would be cared for in every way possible. She had touched his heart, and now he wanted to help heal hers. With her new life came a new name. Gas was renamed Joni, and for such a spirited horse, it was the perfect choice. Along with bonding closely with her human caretakers, Joni also made a new friend, another horse named Scarlet. They had similar pasts and quickly bonded over their shared journey. Joni is a beautiful reminder of how pure animals truly are, and how deeply they can thrive when shown care and love. What an incredible story. Would you have rescued an old horse? Did you know about the practice of pin firing? Share your thoughts in the comments and see you in the next video.